Okay, so we are all set up on Facebook. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Riverwood Conservancy's webinar, Endangered Species, Humpback Whales with Dave Taylor. My name is Stephanie. I'm the Community Program Coordinator at the Riverwood Conservancy. I hope everyone is having a lovely evening. I want to say a special thanks to Credit Valley Conservation for supporting all of the work that we do. Before we get started, I just want to mention that our August programs are now live on our website. Please register for as many virtual or in-person programs as you would like. On your screen now, you should see our entire calendar of events. Anything in green is in-person programming on site at Riverwood, and anything yellow is virtual, so a webinar just like this one. In-person programs include outdoor yoga, meditation, forest bathing events, and all of these spaces are limited, so register for as many sessions as you'd like at the riverwoodconservancy.org/events. And if you would like to support our virtual and on-site programs, as well as conservation of Riverwood's habitat and wildlife, please consider donating on our website. We greatly appreciate any small contribution to make a difference. Before we get to our speaker this evening, the Riverwood Conservancy would like to acknowledge that the land on which we operate is the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, Wendat, and Haudenosaunee nations. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this place is still home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, and we are so grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. And this evening, we have Dave Taylor back again, who is a wildlife photographer and author of more than 40 books on wildlife and ecology. His most recent book, Black Bears, A Natural History, 2nd edition, is available now. Dave also focuses his efforts on producing educational videos and material about wildlife for both the public and to support school curriculum. He has traveled throughout the world capturing nature with his camera, and he frequently visits Tanzania, where he guides wildlife safaris. Dave taught science and geography for more than 30 years and nature photography at Humber College for more than 25 years, and today is a consultant for the Riverwood Conservancy. So welcome, Dave. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A section and we will address them at the end of the presentation. And if you're watching on Facebook, you can just post it in the comment section and we'll get it to at the end as well. So Dave, I will hand it over to you. Thanks so much for being here again.
Thanks, Stephanie, and it's glad to be back. So the topic today is going to be humpback whales in particular, and whales kind of in general. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to start out with a short video as kind of the way we've been doing things lately. So let's go to the video first of some humpback whales. Here we are. And share sound and share. I just have to start playing. Watch this, just imagine you're on a field trip and you're out watching these whales. There we go. So those whales that you were looking at were humpback whales. And Stephanie mentioned at the introduction that I was a teacher for a number of years. And during those number of years, particularly at a school by the name of Hazel McCallion, named after the mayor of a favorite city of mine, I was fortunate enough to take well over 500 students in grade 7 and 8 to go whale watching. And we did that in 2 prime locations. We did grade 7, grade 8 trip 1 year to Tadoussac and Quebec City. And we would go whale watching out of Tadoussac, and we would see belugas and most often humpback whales. And then the next year, the grade 7 and 8s, we would take them down to Plymouth, Massachusetts, and go whale watching from Cape Cod. And it was just spectacular. Whales never fail to disappoint. And it's something I've embraced over the years. I have done a lot of whale watching. And as you'll see in the pictures that are going to come up, just about, well, not all over the world, but in many places in the world. So let's go to a PowerPoint presentation. So, call this the whale's tale, but it's really about the story of how an endangered species has come back. But let's look at the very beginning. Whales evolved, 55 million years ago from land-dwelling animals. Animals, the same branch would give rise to the cow, to deer, to moose, to antelope. When you look at this primitive skull of a primitive whale, you don't see much about it that is herbivore-like. But that's kind of a misconception. A lot of people think of ungulates and even toed animals as being primarily herbivores. There were a number of branches, and some of them experimented with being predators. They weren't carnivores in the sense of an order, but they were carnivorous. So this is a very primitive, very early relative of the whale. And please don't ask me what it's called, because I couldn't pronounce it even if I knew what it was called. Now, to include a picture of a hippopotamus in a story about whales would seem kind of, well, silly. But what a lot of people don't realize is the hippo is a closer relative to whales than just about any other animals living on land today. And they are large and they have big mouths and they do live in the water. But it might surprise you to learn that hippos cannot swim. What hippos can do, and this is very whale-like, is when they are underwater, and they have almost a neutral buoyancy, so they're able to walk on the bottom of the rivers or lakes or whatever they're on. They hear sounds through their jaws. So they pick up the sound in the jaw and it takes it up to where its ear is. And that's exactly what whales do. And that was perhaps the first clue that there might be a relationship between hippos and whales. Distant one though it is. Well, there are 2 branches of the whale family. There are the toothed whales and there are the baleen whales. The toothed whales have teeth, and they come in a variety of shapes and sizes, the largest being the sperm whale, the smallest being the pygmy porpoise. This is a beluga whale. You can see beluga whales in Ontario if you're lucky, but you'd have to be up in James Bay. This particular section of beluga whales was photographed outside of Churchill. And you notice that the water is a little brownish. And the reason it's brownish is because the belugas are coming into the Seal River area. That's where I was when I took these pictures, because that water is fresh and they have parasites on them. And the parasites don't like the fresh water. So they drop off and the belugas have a wonderful time. And they honestly do sound like canaries. When you're close to them in a dinghy and you're just floating there, it really does sound like you're surrounded by canaries. It's a marvelous experience. You can also do that out of Tadoussac, although you won't be able to get probably as close. And to be honest with you, the belugas in Tadoussac, they're a very isolated population. and they have a lot of problems due to the pollution from all of the boat traffic on that river. Now, the most common member of the whale family that you have probably seen if you've ever been to an ocean or to a marine park or marine land, and that's the common dolphin, the bottlenose dolphin. These animals are often seen from the coast. When we're down in Myrtle Beach, we can be sitting on our balcony and we can watch them go by. They are curious. They love to ride the bow waves. They love to follow boats. This one was down in Texas, the Gulf of Mexico. This one was off the coast of Sanibel Island. They're playful, and it's for that reason they're a favorite, and they're easy to see, and they are a really good ambassador for the whale community. People like watching these guys. They're also very smart. They've been studying these whales or these dolphins for decades now, and they've seen some of them, well, they develop like a culture. So there are some dolphins in the tip of Florida that have learned to go into the shallows, and then by swimming rapidly around and around and around, they create a mud circle, a circle of dirt in the water. And this traps the fish because the fish don't think they can swim through it, but the dolphins can, and in they go. I've also seen them several times while I'm walking on the beach, actually chase fish right up onto the shore of the beach and then grab them. They're also a favorite with people to go swimming with. And there are many parks and places where you can pay to go for a snorkel or a swim with these dolphins. I've never done it. These are some people in Hawaii, just outside our hotel room, that were enjoying it. And of course, they're smart enough to be trained. So they're very, very popular for the many tricks they can do. This is a Pacific white-sided dolphin. You'll see those if you are ever fortunate enough to take the Alaska cruise. They're quite common along that. And this is a spinner dolphin. Spinner dolphins, I was told when we were going out to see them, go about in huge, huge pods. And when they start swimming, they jump in the air and they spin, which is what they get their name from. Unfortunately, these are the only spinner dolphins I saw, and they were not spinning. They were just, well, leaping a bit. This is the only bottlenose whale I've ever seen, and as you can tell, it is very, very dead. Two of them had washed up on the shore in Newfoundland, and I was fortunate enough to meet an ex-RCMP officer who was kind enough to take me out to see these whales. They're very rare. You don't see them from tour boats very often, and this is probably the only time in my life I will ever get that close to one living or dead. This is the Plata Dolphin. There are freshwater dolphins, believe it or not, and in the Amazon River Basin, there still are a few. Sometimes they're called the pink dolphin. This one was photographed in a zoo in the United States. And now we're going to pictures of whales in the wild. One of my favorite whales to photograph, it's still a toothed whale, but it's much bigger than the common dolphin, than the bottlenose dolphin, and that's the orca, sometimes called the killer whale. They do breach. I've only seen them breaching in a distance, so don't expect any spectacular pictures. This is actually a tail slap. We know that although we call them orcas or killer whales, there are actually probably several species of orca in the world. You become a species either through isolation or by being isolated, choosing to be isolated. And off the coast of Vancouver Island, there are three groups. There are resident killer whales, which basically hunt salmon. There are transients, which is a different population, and they hunt seals and sea lions. And then there are the nomadic ones that just kind of show up out of nowhere. They're there for a while and then they disappear. And they've been studying these whales for decades as well. And it's amazing what they've learned about how the pods grow, how they change, how the males move about, how the females move about. The resident pods are very quiet. Or sorry, resident pods are very noisy. They are trying to herd salmon, so they're salmon eaters. The transients are very quiet, and they're sneaking up on their prey, which is seals or sea lions, and occasionally whales. The male generally has the taller fin, looks like a massive shark going through the water. They're wonderful animals to see, and you can see them quite frequently on tours. This is out of Night Inlet. I did some off on the Alaska cruise, and I've done some, thanks to the British Columbia government, out of Vancouver and Victoria. They are really popular, as you can tell by the number of people on these boats and the number of boats you see. In fact, if you're going whale watching, you're best not to look for whales, look for whale watching boats. They're a lot easier to spot. And there are very, very, very strict rules about how you must deal with whales. You can't approach them within a certain distance. You must let them approach you. You don't chase them. And the captains that I've been working with have been really good about that. And now we come to the baleen whales. These are the whales that, for the most part, are filter feeders. Their teeth have, over the millions of years, evolved into these long feather-like structures, which strain the food, often krill and microscopic animals, out of their mouths. They have huge tongues. And there are three types of these whales. There's the gray whale, which is in its own category, the rorquals, and I'm going to forget the other name. And I apologize, I'll come back to that. I've got a cheat sheet here, but I'm not going to use it. This is the largest of the baleen whales. I guess it's the baleen whale, that's the third group. No, it's not. This is the blue whale. This was on display at the Royal Ontario Museum. It was a spectacular display. The whale was found, I believe, on a beach in Newfoundland, I think, and then was brought into the museum. Many of you may have gone to see this if you're fancier of whales. They had the whale's heart that they had treated, and it was, like they said, the size of a Volkswagen. It was a fantastic display. Most of the whales that I've seen have been humpback whales, and it's possible to see them from the shore. You're looking for that breath as they come up, that sound that they make. This is off the coast of Newfoundland. If you're on a boat, you can see this breath for, oh, probably well over 2 or 3 kilometers. It'll go maybe 5-10 meters in the air. They have 2 blowholes, and when they come up, they just release this amount of warm air into the water, which the cool air causes to condense, just like you're breathing. It is particularly popular on the east coast of North America. All along the coast from Maine right down to Virginia, you can go humpback whale watching. These whales are doing something called logging. There's 5 of them there, and they are just lying there as the boats drift by. And sometimes they come very close. It's really an experience when they let go of a breath and you kind of drift through it. You'll smell the fish for a while because it is a very, very oily, fishy smelling breath. This is a southern right whale. There's a northern right whale and there is a southern right whale. Southern right whales are doing better than the northern right whales. There are relatively very few northern right whales left. There seems to be a substantial number, or at least a healthy number, of southern right whales. This is off the coast of Cape Town. The right whales have very, very thick tails. This is the tail of a humpback diving. This is the tail of a right whale. And they have a lot of crustaceans, barnacles, that live on their head. And they actually use these as a weapon. So males will charge into other males with these rough barnacles on their forehead and sides and scrape against them, and they will leave scars, as you would tend to do when you're as big as a school bus. Scientists have learned to recognize these whales by the barnacle formations. They tend to last quite a while. They're leapers, breachers, but they don't breach quite like a humpback whale does. This is a fin whale, a rorqual. All of these whales in this category have fins. The right whale doesn't have it. The gray whale doesn't have a fin, but all of the rorquals, the ones with the baleen that have pleated throats, have these fins, and you can learn to identify them. I've never seen a fin whale breach, nor have I seen a minke whale breach, although they do breach from time to time. But this is the star of the whale watching show. This is the humpback whale. This is in a museum, and if you look at it, it's kind of a skeleton with a plasticized skin, see-through skin on it. You can clearly see that the whales have digits. This is one of the reasons they know that they once were related to land animals. Off the coast of Alaska again. Humpback whales have been studied in various areas, and there are several populations of humpback whales. And there's now some thought that they may in fact be at least different subspecies and perhaps even different species of humpback whale. There are the whales that go from Alaska to Hawaii. There are the whales that go from the Antarctic up to Australia. There are whales that go from Antarctica up into the Galapagos area. There are whales that go up from the Bahamas to Iceland. These are all different populations. And some of them are very different. Now, scientists quickly figure a way of identifying a whale. They try and photograph its tail. And you notice that each of these tails are very different. Well, they have books full of whales' tails, literally books, with hundreds, not thousands of whales over the years whose tails have helped them identify. And they can follow their life. They can follow the lives of cows and their calves, and then they see the calves.
I found this on the web.
Oh, thank you. What? Google is working overtime. Sorry about that, folks. One of the things that will strike you immediately when you see humpback whale, besides its size, is that pale blue ghost-like thing under the water. It's fins, it's flukes. They do not have barnacles, but they have bumps about the size of grapefruits on their head, and they will use those as ramming. Now, this is an Australian humpback whale. And I know it's an Australian humpback whale because Australian humpback whales look different from the whales we have in North America on both coasts. They are more white on the bottom. So as you look at these whale pictures, if you see a whale with a lot of white on the bottom, that was one that was taken or photographed off the coast of Australia, off the coast of, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. Notice how white this fella's breech is. This is a Hawaiian whale. Notice how black its body is. When you see breaching, you are really seeing the pinnacle of whale behavior for an audience. They are magnificent. To see an animal that big come out of the water, it's amazing. And sometimes you see it a little too close. And there's been a case recently reported where a whale almost landed on a boat. This whale was just maybe 20 meters in front of the boat I was on. And I just got my camera up in time to catch this one shot. It was a little scary. There have been cases where they have come up and tipped over small boats. There are, well, how do I phrase this? In North America, my understanding in the United States is you are not allowed to dive or snorkel with these whales. And it's something I am reluctant to do, even if I had the choice, because there is one case, it may not be true, but I believe it to be true, where one of these whales, in just pure playfulness, grabbed the leg of a scuba diver, actually a couple of scuba divers, and then went down. Now, whales, when they dive, their body gets flattened. All of their fat, their blubber gets condensed. It protects them, protects their organs. And they get much, much slimmer. And then as they come back up, we humans don't have that. So if you were trapped in the mouth of a humpback whale and it took you down, you're not going to come back up. And I don't think they would deliberately do anything to harm people, but I don't think I can forget that story. It's kind of like the first time you see Jaws and you wonder about, is it safe to go in the water? Some of us even wondered if it was safe to go in our bathtubs. These whales have a variety of behaviors. Their courting behavior is what you saw in the film. The males do a lot of slapping and they do a lot of chasing. They'll blow a lot of bubbles and they go after another male, trying to intimidate them. But they also, some, not all, create bubble nets. So what the whale does is it dives deep down and then it starts swimming in circles and it releases the oxygen from its lungs, or it's carbon dioxide in this case, I guess, and it starts to bubble up, and it is this nest, becomes really a net of bubbles. And the fish, like the fish with the dolphins, don't think they can swim through it. And then the whales come up through it, open their mouths. They have these huge pleated throats that open up, massive things, and they catch fish in this case. I've seen one or two do it, but you've probably seen the National Geographic and BBC films where there are hundreds doing it. These two whales are showing off against each other. They're trying to intimidate. I'm a healthier male than you are. And that's really what breaching is. And so is a tail slap, bringing your tail down hard in the water. These flukes would be, taller than me. They're 6 to 8 feet in length, and they bring them down with this amazing bang. Now they are white in just about every humpback I've seen. This one's really showing off. It's doing 2 at a time. There you can see the plated throat patch, how it expands. This is that whale back in Australia. And this is from a cliff in Newfoundland. And it's really fun to watch these whales swim below you. Of course, they face a lot of dangers. The shipping lanes are a real problem. It's more the noise of the ships. Humpback whales are known for their singing, and they develop a new song every year. And it is designed, we think, or they think, to initiate mating behavior. It's quite amazing how they learn these songs. And the songs can travel for 10s and 20s and 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers, even further through the ocean. But with all the noise that we brought in the ocean with freighters and carriers and just people having fun, the ocean is a very noisy place. So it's harder to have whales find each other. They think that during COVID, when shipping was really curtailed, the whales had a very different experience. And it'll be interesting to see what sort of results come out of that. And there we have the talk part. And now we put me up to risk and you get to ask me some questions. So Stephanie, back to you. Still here, huh?
I am. I'm always still here, Dave.
I know.
That was really awesome. Such great photos too. Really, really cool. We have a couple questions that came in. First one came in, how long can whales remain submerged?
It depends on the species, but 30 minutes is a common figure you hear. If you're watching whales, you learn to see how deep their dive is. So if their back goes up just a little bit, they're not going very deep. But if it really humps up and you see a lot of tail, they're going to be down. And usually the boat captains will say, well, they're going to be gone for 10, 15, 20 minutes. And sometimes you just never see them again. And the other thing is they can travel great distances. I remember photographing an otter, which is not a whale. And the otter was playing around in front of me. This is down in South Carolina, and it was a pond that I could see both ends of it. And the otter took a dive, and I never saw it again. It just disappeared. I've been working with beaver, and I've seen them swim the length of a football field underwater. And it's just amazing. Well, think what a whale could do when it can stay down 30 minutes and hold and propel itself. It can come up quite a distance away. The fact that they don't often do that is quite amazing. It's like they're wanting to be seen. So, but it does vary from species to species, and also from the type of prey. If you want to see whales, Newfoundland is just an excellent place to go in July when the Caitlin are running. My wife and I were there a few years ago, and we got to go on several whale watching boats. We were doing some work for the Newfoundland government, and it was amazing how many whales we saw. Saw very few breaches because they're not breeding and they're not showing off. They do breach, but not like they do. If you want to see breaching, you go to Hawaii at Christmas time or in January, February, because they're off the coast of Maui, and literally hundreds again. And we saw breaches from the shore. I saw them from the ships I was on, the boats I was on. It was really impressive.
Thanks, Dave. The next question is kind of a hypothetical.
Okay.
Could the extinct megalodon take on a full-grown humpback whale?
Well, certainly when the megalodon, which was a huge, it's always portrayed as a huge version of a great white shark. I think the new studies are showing it was not quite. I have megalodon teeth someplace around here. They're like white tooth shark is like about that big. Megalodon shark, one I have is about that big. And then our former executive director at Riverwood, he's collected some that were bigger than that. And he collected them in a creek bed, I think, in South Carolina. They often turn up on the shores of Florida beaches. Not often, but often enough that it's a thing. So a megalodon was a big shark. I'm sure it could have attacked the humpback whale if the humpback whale had existed back then. There were certainly whales back then that were as big as a humpback. So, but nobody really knows for sure what megalodons fed on, because the sharks don't, their innards don't fossilize very well, given that they rot in the ocean. And given that we don't have any bones of whales, that I don't think there are any cases, I could be wrong, but I don't think there are any cases where they've actually found shark teeth marks on fossilized whales. But I'm sure there's some paleontologist out there who will say, whoa, wait a second, you're wrong.
So megalodons aren't as big as they are portrayed in movies, is what you're trying to say.
They were big.
But not that big.
No, I was in a cage once to see a white shark off of South Africa. And it's big. And it did I was fortunate enough that it did the cage rattling. And honestly, I was so excited. I got just terrible pictures. I want to go back and do it sometime, but just to see that thing come out of the gloom and go by you. And it was only like a 13-foot fish. Well, the megalodon was considerably bigger than that, like more like 30 feet, maybe.
Wow.
I definitely wouldn't be going in the water, but it's not as big as it was portrayed in that movie.
No.
You don't need to worry about that.
A pretty good question came in. Do all whales have holes that shoot water and mist to the sky?
Well, they don't shoot water so much. That's kind of a myth. It is a mist. It's like your breath is condensed, but there is some oil in it, and there's certainly the droplets. Just like when with COVID, we're very aware that if we have COVID and we sneeze, it's not just moisture that we're putting out, it could be droplets of these little viruses. Well, a whale's breath contains all sorts of stuff. But it is not water. It's not like you've driven down into the ocean, taken a deep lungful of water and come up and spit it out like a fountain. That's not what a whale's doing. It's expelling CO2. It's breathing just like you and I do. It's just like if you came up from water and laid back and breathed out and blew some water, which is fun to do. I mean, if you want to pretend you're a hippo, you can do it all the time. Lots of people do it in pools.
Next question that came in, how deep can a humpback go?
I have no idea. I'd have to use a cheat sheet. I know they go several hundred meters down. I don't think they hold the record. I think the sperm whale holds the record, which is like far below what would crush a normal submarine type of depth. It's just amazing. They go down where there is no light at all and hunt the giant squids. Humpbacks, I don't believe, dive that far. They tend to be seen mostly in more shallow waters. So I'm sure they can dive deep enough to kill a diver if they drag them down, but I wouldn't say they're the world records. One of the deepest diving animals is the elephant seal. They were just amazed. I think it's something like 1,500 meters an elephant seal can go. And then they'll and this is a seal, this is not a whale. They will sort of just lie maybe 200, 300 meters below the surface of the ocean and sleep. Just kind of their bodies flatten down, they've got enough oxygen, and they come up, take a breath. And whales are capable of much more than that. So.
Okay, so 2 more questions here. Why do humpbacks seem to breach more than other whale species?
They do, and that's really been the secret of their success. Humpback whales were an endangered species, and so this goes back to the main topic, so I'm going to take a minute on this one. Humpback whales really got saved because people stopped hunting whales back on the East Coast. They realized we were losing them, they were endangered species. So you had all these fishermen, and they couldn't go fishing. They couldn't, well, actually whalers, they couldn't go whaling anymore. So they decided to use their boats to take people out to see these whales. So I started going whale watching when I was probably in my mid-20s. And there were a few thousand whales on the East Coast that you might see, and you always saw them, which was remarkable because it's a big ocean. But you'd see whales, and they would do these things with the tail, and not so much the breaching, but they would do the fluke slaps and the tail slaps, and they would eye hop. That's where they come out of the water and they look at you, and they look at you. I mean, you look a whale in the eye, that is a moving experience. You're not looking at, you look a shark in the eye, it's got black eyes. You look a whale in the eye, you see its intelligence. You see this orb looking back to you, an orb that's like that big or bigger. And it's thinking, and it's looking at you, and you're looking at it. And it's like we're trying to reach across the Gulf. Well, the humpback whales were really good at that. And because of that, more and more people started to go whale watching, and more people started spending money to go whale watching. So you had whale watching industries start to pop up all over the country. You can go whale watching at Christmas time out of Virginia. Now, it's cold at Christmas time in Virginia Beach, but there are whale watching tours because there are still humpback whales off the coast. And we know where whales are. So Iceland, you go in the summer. Newfoundland, you go in the summer. Maine is good from May right through to the end of August, into September a little bit. The Bahamas are good. Hawaii is good from, say, end of November through to end of March when they start heading back up to Alaska. Then Alaska's great. But this whole industry grew up. So people started to care about whales. And then the other whale that was equally important to this story is the killer whale, the whale you would go see in Marineland and places like that. And people have been protesting, and there are fewer and fewer of them. But back in the 60s, this was an ambassador for the whaledom kingdom. People started to appreciate how important whales were and how intelligent they were. And because of that, moratoriums and whale hunting. Now, Japan continued to hunt whales. I think it still does today. And I remember, I think it was at a World's Fair or something in the 70s or 80s, they were going to sell whale blubber as a snack. It didn't go over well. People had come to the conclusion that we really don't want whales killed anymore. And as a result, the humpback whale population, which was down around 30,000, is upwards to maybe as many as 150,000. And that's all because people started connecting with these animals. And I think that's a marvelous story and a great lesson to have. And hopefully through these talks, we're helping you connect with some of these animals too, not just whales. Stephanie.
For sure. And one more question, and it actually comes from me, Dave, and I'm just wondering, with rising sea levels and warming oceans because of climate change, how are these populations being impacted? Are all whale populations being impacted by climate change, or?
What will impact them will be the loss of their food.
Right.
So in the Galapagos, for instance, when it gets warm, the cold water fish, the fish that the whales rely on, don't show up. So you don't see many humpback whales. But because you're not seeing many humpback whales doesn't mean they're not humpback whales there. They've probably gone someplace else where they're not reachable. So when fishermen in South America complain that El Nino has driven away the fish stocks of anchovies or whatever, it's not so much that the anchovies have died out, it's that they've gone someplace else and they can't find them and they can't reach them because their boats aren't designed that way. So climate change will impact whales if it starts to impact their food. And we do know that climate change is affecting things like coral reefs and certainly other marine environments. But it's also expanding marine environments. There are waterways that are open. You know, there was a great to-do 150 years ago. They found a whale bone in the harbor in Toronto. And people thought, wow, whales made it here. And they could have, perhaps. But what it turned out to be was somebody had a little museum and they had a whale that they brought in. But there were certainly whales down around Montreal and the St. Lawrence, because during the last ice age, as the oceans rose, salt water came much further in, and whales would come in to that area. So they found fossil seals and fossil whales in that area. And those belugas, they were an isolated population that were a victim of climate change. They got isolated as the ice age melted back. They couldn't figure out their way around Labrador to go up with the rest of them, the belugas whale, and they stayed in the Saguenay, and they did okay until we came along and polluted the water. So I think climate change might impact them. I think it will probably be something, if given half a chance, they'll be able to survive because they've survived ice ages and before that, warmer climates and colder climates. But if we combine that with pollutions and things like that and overfishing, it could be a real problem. So hopefully I'm going to say it probably won't have a great impact, but I wouldn't take it for granted.
Right. Well, thank you for answering that, Dave. And I think all of your presentations are making a huge impact on Mississauga, and anybody that's watching outside of Mississauga too. And really, we've learned so much, and hopefully that means that more people will care about these species too for the future. So
I'm curious to know, and then I don't think we can find out, but I'm curious to know if any of the audience is actually one of the students that we took from Hazel McCallion on one of those whale watching trips. I would love to see schools get back into doing that again. It's such a fabulous experience. If you're a teacher and you want to know how to do it, you can get in touch with me through the Riverwood Conservancy and I'll help you do it.
And where'd you take them to, Dave, again?
We alternated trips. We did Quebec City for some cultural French stuff.
Right.
And then we went to Tadoussac and stayed at Tadoussac, and then we went out in the Saguenay and out in the St. Lawrence. That was 1 year. That'd be, and then the following year we went to Boston and Plymouth, Old Plymouth, fantastic story. Great ghost stories at night on the haunted walk. But we would spend a day out in the ocean watching whales, and
it
awesome. Was amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, you'd be surprised how close whales really are to us. I mean, that's where I saw my first whale, was in Tadoussac, going camping in Tadoussac, and yeah, just like 10 hours away from here driving, and you see whales. So that's pretty cool.
If you cross the Saguenay and go up to Les Eskimos, I think that's how it's pronounced. There are places there where you can sit on the rocks and you can see minkies and humpbacks right off the shore.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. That's a summer trip, folks. That's not one you can do. Though going to Pierce Rock will probably give you a good chance at seeing humpback whales too.
Right.
All the places I've been. I'm getting old, but I got a lot of good memories.
Well, thanks for sharing them with us, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have any final words before we end the webinar for this evening?
Just to let people know that the slides that you saw are going to be on the my YouTube channel, and I think Stephanie's going to post that.
Yep.
Along with the video. And the last talk I did, I was bemoaning the fact that I hadn't seen any foxes. Well, I have seen foxes since then. Thank you very much to the person who pointed me in the right direction, and to all the lovely people out there who were kind enough to share with me their knowledge of the local foxes. The video, we posted a video with narration and without narration of a young fox doing some hunting. So enjoy it if you enjoyed the fox talk. And thank you, Stephanie. We'll see you in a couple of weeks for bald eagles.
Sounds great, Dave. Yeah, for everybody watching, the links to Dave's talks are in the chat right now on Zoom, and I'll post them on Facebook for those that are watching on Facebook too, just in a couple minutes. Thanks so much, Dave, for another great webinar, and everyone have a great evening. We'll see you at the next one.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.